Good morning. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy on Smart Money, the smartmoneyculture.tv. And we've got an interesting show today. We're going to talk about bankruptcy. I get a lot of questions about bankruptcy, and people all the time want to know how bankruptcy interacts with taxes. So that's going to be the focus of our conversation today. And you want to thank everybody watching live or on rebroadcast. But before we jump into that, there's a lot of interesting news about the IRS. So again, having some good information about what's going on, what to expect is very interesting. It again keeps you up to speed. And I've been enjoying pulling up the news today. So we've got a couple stories that we're going to cover, but most of the time we'll spend talking about bankruptcy and taxes. So thank you again, turning in, and look to have a wonderful show this morning. So I'm very excited for this. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you again for watching Taxes Made Easy on the smartmoneyculture.tv. If you're watching live or on rebroadcast, we appreciate you watching. Again, if you have questions about anything on the show, feel free to reach out to us through smartmoneyculture.tv. There's a corner button in the corner of that where you can, top right corner, says opportunity. You can click on that, and that's how you can get a hold of us directly through smartmoneyculture.tv, or you can contact Guardian Tax Law, my office, by going directly to our website at guardiantaxlaw.com or calling us at 520-485-7371. So there's a lot in the news today, and I just want to kind of touch on this. The news today really is focused towards those that are struggling financially, those that do not have lower income taxpayers. Now, a lot of this applies to everybody, but there are free legal tax clinics across the country. A lot of them closed due to COVID. I volunteered and actually taught at one clinic. And it's cut back its services due to COVID. So, actually, I don't even think I have my headphones plugged in. So one of the concerns here is there's not enough services out there. So the IRS came out yesterday afternoon with a new supplemental application period. So if you know of anybody that's running a low income tax clinic or interested in helping with one, this is where the government gives grants so they can help low income clients across the country. So they're trying to even this out and provide for it. So believe it or not, if you go to local law schools, sometimes they have tax clinics. It's very common for them to have law clinics, and they might have a tax clinic as well. Depends on what's available. The problem being is that there's entire states that don't have any low income tax clinics. So that's something to be concerned about. So the IRS is really trying to focus on certain states, namely Hawaii, Kansas, Nevada, North Dakota, South Dakota, West Virginia, and the territory of Puerto Rico do not have a low-income tax clinic. So that's a big issue, and especially when there's any kinds of language barriers. People need assistance, and dealing with the IRS is not straightforward. So running with that theme, again, just real quick, want to touch on the budget. So what happens when the budget shuts down? Who gets affected the most? The poorest. So people dependent on federal aid, federal payments, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Majority Leader Mike Johnson have been summoned to the White House to try to hammer something out because the deadline is Friday for part of the federal government, and then the other deadline is a week from Friday. So they're trying to hammer out some kind of bill. Republicans are demanding steep cuts to try to balance the budget and do something about the border. The Democrats want to continue things as they are, if not increase spending. So again, they're going two separate directions. Whether or not they'll come to an agreement, who knows? Because not only do they have to come to an agreement, the House and the Senate have to be able to pass these separate bills going two separate directions. So that's the Republicans and the Democrats are further apart than ever at this moment. So be aware of that it's going to affect it. So I'm going to jump to a funnier story here. We've got 4 different stories, but they all kind of follow the same thing of trying to keep the government on track and make sure the little guys get protected. So people ask me all the time, does government know what's in your bank account? They shouldn't. They should not. They should not be able to get into your personal information without a warrant, or if you owe taxes, they can demand it as part of a resolution, and they frequently do. But, so this one is on PM, the post-millennial, and it's kind of funny. So James O'Keefe, who is known for Project Veritas and other expose videos, cornered someone from the IRS Criminal Investigations Unit, which is pretty high up in the IRS. These are the people that investigate fraud, they investigate taxpayers, and they make referrals to the prosecutors within the IRS. And so, again, this is very serious if you have criminal investigations looking at you. So the question is, at one point, Alex Mena is the poor IRS employee that was being cornered, and Mr. Mena at one point had a moment of clarity where he admitted to Mr. O'Keefe that the IRS was using artificial intelligence to get banking information from taxpayers. Now hold the phone. The IRS has plenty of legal ways to go after information, but if they're looking and pursuing criminal actions, don't they need a subpoena? Don't they need a warrant? Don't they need to follow a process? Due process is very important in this country, as it should be. So they're doing warrantless searches using artificial intelligence, and O'Keefe tried to corner Alex Mena to get some more information from him and question him, and it turned into a foot race. Poor Mr. Mena took off at a sprint, and O'Keefe chased him for about a mile with his cameraman in tow until Alex Mena cut into a building with a locked door so he couldn't be followed. And the cameraman was had fallen behind. He was suffering due to the run too. So kind of a little humorous, but kind of scary at the same time. What is our government doing? Are they breaking the law to go after taxpayers? Now, what should be private information, is that not becoming private? We saw this with FISA warrants. We saw this, with other warrantless searches where plenty of abuses took place. So it is a big concern. The last article I want to share, this is from Yahoo Finance. And this came out actually a year ago, but again, talking about these new tax audits. And they're not just going after the rich. That's the line that the politicians always put out. The IRS has flat out admitted they have no way to just target the rich. It might be focusing on the higher income earners, or trying to. But again, this is the reporter through Yahoo Finance talking about how the majority of audits fall on those making $25,000 or less. Now they make up a huge portion of the population, so of course they're going to get hit with audits too. But for 50% of total audits, they're not 50% of the population. So it disproportionately, this is from a study done by Syracuse University's Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse, or TRAC. It goes after people claiming earned income credit or the EITC and making less than $25,000. So just because you're not making a lot of money doesn't mean the IRS isn't going to come after you. And the worst part about it is people that are wealthier can afford to hire representation, make sure their rights are protected. If you're making under $25,000, it's much more difficult to hire an attorney or hire a tax professional and make sure they're good, that can go and help you. So what do? This is where these low income tax clinics can be so important, but also calling someone that can give you some free advice, steer you in the right direction. There are plenty of firms out there that will give someone some free advice without charging a consultation, or it might be worth the consultation fee just to talk to someone and get some good advice. We review tax letters for free at Guardian Tax Law. We'll do that as a public service. And if people have questions, we'll help steer them in the right direction, explain to them what needs to be done. But again, if you're getting these letters, get some help, reach out. There's plenty of resources online, but if you don't understand what's going on, call and get some help. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And if you're in a state that doesn't have a low-income tax center, reach out to one that's not in your area. And so, again, I've volunteered and assisted at low-income tax clinics before because I do think it serves a very valuable purpose. Most of these audits are coming in by mail, so you're not talking with anybody through these audit process. And so it's much more difficult to get advice. There's also local volunteer income tax assistance centers that you can look up. It's called VITA, VITA. So if you're lost and confused and getting hit by an audit, get some answers. And so again, this is very important for low income earners. I see it too often where they call the IRS, they're given bad information, they're told they have to pay, or the world's going to fall. They have rights. And the nice thing about low income earners is that they usually qualify for offer and compromises or a hardships plan. So unfortunately, the IRS will almost never offer a hardship plan or a non-collectible status. They almost always try to put someone on an installment agreement rather than give them your full rights and information. Now we're going to pivot. The rest of the time we're going to talk about bankruptcy, and this is a great segue into bankruptcy. When should you consider filing for bankruptcy? Now, this is a personal question. Some people are adamant they'll never file for bankruptcy. They want to pay all their debts. They want to get square with all their creditors. And that's fine. That's the personal convictions. But for many people, it's a way out. It's a legal remedy. We have these remedies in place to help people not become indigent and stay poor, that they can get a fresh start and restart their lives. And the wealthy, large companies file for bankruptcy on a regular basis. They use the bankruptcy laws to their favor, and if you're comfortable with it, there's no reason why you can't as well. So we're coming up on another break in 10 seconds, and we're going to really dive into bankruptcy and taxes, and when should you consider it, and when is it not a good idea. So we'll be back shortly, and thank you for watching. Welcome back. Hubert Johnson here with Guardian Tax Law, and Taxes Made Easy on the smartmoneyculture.tv. So we're talking about bankruptcy. So yesterday we talked about expiration dates, and we talked about when does that expiration date start running. It's when the tax debt is assessed. So when you file it, and then the IRS processes your return. So it's that date of processing that's so important. So that's when the IRS has a chance to start moving forward on your case. Now, same thing with bankruptcy. It is so important to file your taxes timely, because the tax returns that are already filed and have been on file for at least 3 years are eligible for bankruptcy. Now, I got to throw this caveat out there. You have bankruptcy districts throughout the country. So depending on where you live in the United States, you need to look up which bankruptcy district you're in. Well, you don't need to look it up, but you need to find a local bankruptcy attorney. The main reason is because you can't use someone across the country, because they might not be familiar with your local district's rules. So I usually almost always recommend that someone contact a local bankruptcy attorney when you need to file for bankruptcy. Now, so check with them about these rules. There's a 280-day rule here in Arizona. It varies. And I'm not the expert on this, but in general, if you have recently filed tax debt, it can't be included in bankruptcy. So if all that you owe is taxes and you haven't filed your tax returns for 10 years, you can't file all your returns and then say, hey, I'm going to file for bankruptcy. That's seen as not fair dealing. The IRS doesn't have any time to try to collect on it. And so anything that's filed can't be included in a bankruptcy as long as it's filed within that 3-year period. Now, again, caveat, check on your local bankruptcy district. One, I'm not a bankruptcy attorney, but two, it varies across the country. So I would make sure you're talking to a local bankruptcy attorney as well. What about older debt? If it's older than 3 years, in most cases, and I said most cases because there's fraud exceptions and other things like that, but you can include tax debt in bankruptcy. So if you have older debt that's been sitting around a long time, you have two options. Option one is deal directly with the IRS to settle, get in a hardship plan or a hardship status, or to do installment agreement. Now, state tax is the same. So if you have older state tax, you can file for bankruptcy and wipe it out. Most state taxes, again, if it's fraud or if it's criminal related, there are exceptions. But again, talk to your local bankruptcy attorney and they can tell you what should be discharged and what shouldn't be discharged in a bankruptcy or put into a Chapter 11. So there are different kinds of bankruptcies too. But again, we're just going to focus first of all on when you should consider filing for bankruptcy. I've shared some stories where I've actually told people you need to file for bankruptcy. And some of these where the debt wasn't all older, some of it was newer, but it's where the taxpayer had waited, had procrastinated until the IRS hammer was about to fall. In almost all cases, when doesn't matter how bad the case is after you win unless it goes to criminal, that's a different issue. But we're talking about keeping it with the IRS. When it gets to that point, you can go in, file for bankruptcy, and stop all collections actions. But then you have to go through the bankruptcy process, and you have a trustee assigned. So you lose control of your assets. You're not the one determining what gets sold or not. So again, that's why it's so important to go talk to a bankruptcy attorney. Most bankruptcies, if they're personal bankruptcies, are not that expensive. A couple thousand, maybe $3. It depends. When you involve business assets, that's when it gets to be a lot more expensive and burdensome. So make sure you get good information before you go in there. And when I have people that I can help, but they ask about bankruptcy, I'm like, look, here's the gist of it, but call a local bankruptcy attorney, get that information, get informed, because I'm not a bankruptcy attorney. I'm not claiming to be one. Don't want to be one. So when the time is right to file bankruptcy, do that. So when would you consider filing for bankruptcy? Most times when it's just tax debt and you can deal with it with the IRS, I would recommend just deal with the IRS, especially if you have newer tax debt. So if you have older and newer tax debt, ironically, if you're considering offering compromise, it can hurt your chances at an offer if you wipe out half of the debt through a bankruptcy and then you still have to deal with the other half on the back end. Ironically, the more you owe, the more likely you're going to qualify for an offer in compromise. I would never, ever tell someone to owe more money, though, to try to wipe it out in an offer in compromise. Bad advice. If it doesn't work out, something happens, you make more money. There's a dozen things that could happen. So never plan to owe more money. It's just not worth it. So situations where it makes sense to file bankruptcy is if you have other debt that's more urgent. Now, what's more urgent than the IRS? Well, if they've gone and gotten judgments against you, so if your car's about to get repoed, if you're about to lose your home, if you're about to, if you can't afford medical bills, so when other debt is really piled on top of you, and it's, to that person more urgent to deal with than the IRS issues, bankruptcy might be the option. So when I see that and I talk to people and I go through all their debt, and I'm like, okay, maybe negotiating with the IRS first isn't the thing to do. Maybe file for bankruptcy, discharge what you can, and then we'll deal with whatever IRS tax debt is left over. And that's usually when the other creditors already have judgments. They're coming after them. They're really hitting them hard, and so that's when filing for bankruptcy makes the most sense. So be aware, if you have newer tax debt, not a good fit for bankruptcy. If you have a business tax debt, bankruptcy should be a last-ditch option. You could file for Chapter 11 to reorganize your business, but again, that gets a lot more expensive and in depth, and you have to talk to a bankruptcy attorney to discuss that. And not all bankruptcy attorneys do those kind of cases, so make sure they know what they're doing and have experience when you call if you have a business. The larger the business, the more expertise you need. That's when you might consider filing for bankruptcy. What are the advantages of bankruptcy? So, first of all, it stops all collections, not just by the IRS, but by other collection agencies as well. Everybody has to put their hands up and say, look, okay, we're not doing this. They can get hit with some very massive penalties if they do pursue you and they know you're in bankruptcy. But you need to make sure that all your debt is included in the bankruptcy. So gotta talk to a bankruptcy attorney, include everything out there. And it can definitely be an issue when you have debts that aren't included in the bankruptcy. So there are different kinds of bankruptcies. The most common is called a Chapter 7. This is where you go in and you don't have enough income to meet all of your expenses. You have, depending on the state, because again, the rules vary depending on bankruptcy district. They might allow you more assets. They might allow you, based on income, be more forgiving, etc. And just in general, liberal states tend to have more liberal bankruptcy laws. And that can definitely help people. Now, if you file for Chapter 7, you qualify for it. Anything that's included in the bankruptcy gets discharged, which means it gets wiped out. You don't have to worry about it. So if you do still have tax debt remaining or tax issues remaining, you have to file your taxes before you can qualify for bankruptcy. I believe it's the last 3 years. So if you're preparing or thinking you're going to file for bankruptcy, give us a call. We'll help you make sure you get your tax returns prepared. We'll get you the information needed to file your tax returns. And we do that frequently. Well, we'll do the first part of the case. Then they'll go file for bankruptcy, and whatever's left over, we'll take care of that once the bankruptcy is done. It just means that we have to wait until the bankruptcy is done and the bankruptcy hold is lifted off of case. It used to be 6 months. That's kind of the technical measure. But now the IRS they're lifting that hold sooner. So you've got to be aware and on top of it once it comes out of bankruptcy that they might start coming after you sooner, because that's been the general trend with the IRS. The other plan is a Chapter 11. A Chapter 11 bankruptcy, Chapter 11 is for businesses. Chapter 13 is where you go in and you have enough money, you have enough assets that you can cover a good chunk of your your debts, and so then they put you on a payment plan. So if you're on a payment plan to cover your taxes this entire time, you're on this payment plan, the IRS can't come after you. But if you're on this payment plan for 5 years, nothing's going to expire either. So bankruptcy extends out the expiration date for as long as you're in the bankruptcy. So some people think, oh, why do I have this tax debt that's sitting out there? That's, more than 10 years old, filing for bankruptcy, filing and for anything things that extend it out, make it that much longer before your tax debt will expire. So again, bankruptcy can be very handy in many ways. You can get rid of a lot of tax debt. You can put all your tax debt into one payment plan and pay it through the bankruptcy. There are attorney fees, there's trustee fees. So again, that's a concern there. But one step at a time as you go through this, and when you come out of bankruptcy, either after 5 years or after Chapter 7, be aware you've got to get back out there. You've got to address the IRS. You've got to address any leftover debt that wasn't included in the bankruptcy. So how do you know? A lot of people, they come out of bankruptcy and they don't know what's been included, what hasn't been included in bankruptcy. The best thing you can do is contact a tax professional, have them again review. You can either go through irs.gov and pull your transcripts, see what's still there. You have to go year by year and check the account transcripts is the ones I usually look at. Those are the easiest to look at to see what's happened on your case. And it will tell you what's been discharged, what hasn't. Here's a big problem I see people run into. They file for bankruptcy and it doesn't get completed. So when you go into bankruptcy, this is why it's so important to get good advice. Make sure you do it right. Because when you ring the bell of bankruptcy, it's one of those things you can't unring it. So true story, I had for when I was with you, we were playing with bankruptcies and we did a couple. And one of them, it was just, this is why we didn't get into it more, because people turned out not to be the most honest. She had a business, it was a small daycare. And she said the whole time, it's a small daycare. No assets, no employees. We had her fill out multiple questionnaires. We reviewed the information with her multiple times. We put together all the information. The entire time she said, no accounts receivables, no accounts receivables. And then when we submitted for bankruptcy and rang that bell, all of a sudden she had an extra vehicle she didn't tell us about. All of a sudden the bankruptcy operation or business had multiple employees, had a building that at least. It was much more complicated, and she definitely had accounts receivables. All of that was taken by the trustee. The client tried to get mad and try to come after us because now she was upset. She was losing a car and she was losing a good chunk of her accounts receivables because she denied that she had them and that she had regular flowing accounts multiple times. And we talked to her about it. She goes, no. So again, we have plenty of documentation on our side, but anytime you hire an attorney, garbage in, garbage out. If you give them bad information, they cannot represent you well. And I've seen this plenty of times on the tax side where people hide information, think the IRS isn't going to find it. All of a sudden it comes out, oh yeah, I have an extra 100,000 in this bank account, or I have this property. I was hoping they just wouldn't find it. And it never turns out well. So especially with bankruptcy in the IRS, you can try to backpedal and try to read, negotiate, change things. If you file for bankruptcy and you don't disclose things, two things happen. One, you don't finish the bankruptcy, which means that 8-year period to refile for bankruptcy is still in place. You still have a bankruptcy on your record. Most of the damage is done, but you actually don't get any discharge. So nothing gets discharged if you don't complete the process. If you start a 5-year payment plan, you don't complete it, what's paid has been paid, but again, then it unravels and it becomes a giant mess. So this is why it's so important to talk to your attorneys. Make sure you full disclosure before you even think about filing for bankruptcy. Get good information and go into it prepared. And make sure you're doing it right. A bankruptcy, if not done right, can absolutely hurt someone's finances, and it can hurt your process moving forward. Plus, it extends out Like it can be years that extends out when the IRS has to collect on you. So again, there's plenty of horror stories out there about bankruptcy. Most of the time, though, there aren't issues. It's fairly straightforward. Just go sit down with a bankruptcy attorney, make sure you know what you're getting into, and have someone that'll help you through the process. If you need a referral to a bankruptcy attorneys, we do refer to bankruptcy attorneys on a regular basis. And again, you can always reach out to us at guardiantaxlaw.com, as well as refer to other professionals. So make sure you can talk to a local bankruptcy attorney, someone you don't have to sit down with them, but you have to have the ability to sit down and talk with them. And make sure they're an actual attorney. Ask what state their bar license is in, and you should be able to look them up, not only on the bar, but online as well. As far as bankruptcy, the worst thing about a bankruptcy when dealing with the IRS is what's called the bankruptcy hold. So when a bankruptcy is filed, you just have to fax over the bankruptcy filing to the IRS, but they see it pretty quickly. And as soon as you mention bankruptcy, they go hands up. Okay, we're stopping. They might need to see the actual filing, but again, it's something that goes on pretty quickly on your case at the IRS. Stops all collections actions. Stops everything. You can't resolve the case. You can't move it forward. You can't do anything until the bankruptcy hold comes off. So what if you're trying to buy, sell property? What if you're trying to move some assets around? You're trying to make some decisions. Once you file for bankruptcy, again, you are not in charge of your assets. You have given that control over to the bankruptcy trustee. So anything you want to do, you have to ask the trustee for permission. And if it doesn't align with the trustee's interests, you might not get permission to do so. So if you are going to move stuff around, again, talk to a bankruptcy attorney before you do this, because you can cause a lot of problems if you do things either right before a bankruptcy or during a bankruptcy. So again, get advice and counsel before you make major decisions, as it can have a huge impact. One, if you want, it can make it so it's not a good idea to file for bankruptcy. But two, if you're in a bankruptcy, it can cause your bankruptcy to default. And again, you have the credit issues, all the problems of filing for bankruptcy, but very few of the benefits. So again, we'll be right back. Our next break is coming up in about 10, 15 seconds. We're going to try to wrap up bankruptcy and talk about the next session, what we'll talk about tomorrow. So we will be right back in a short bit and wrap up bankruptcy and taxes. Welcome back, everybody. This final session for discussing bankruptcy and how it affects your tax case or taxes in general. So ideally with the bankruptcy, you're able to include all the tax debt in there. And there's times people they'll file their tax debt, get all the tax returns filed, and then wait to file for bankruptcy until everything can be included. But that means you usually have to wait a couple of years. It can be a pain. Again, if you have one of the big problems with continuing to owe the IRS is that if you're in any kind of Chapter 13 payment plan and you continue to owe the IRS, that causes some pretty nasty problems. So that's why making regular estimated tax payments or having sufficient withholdings makes a big difference. You want to make sure that you're on a straight path and you're not going to owe moving forward. So what happens if there are tax debts not included in bankruptcy, state tax debts, other issues? So everything gets shelved while you're in bankruptcy. So it's kind of a giant pause. But what you have to be very aware of, that anytime you have a pause with dealing with bankruptcy or other issues, it comes around. It doesn't get forgotten. So when your bankruptcy is complete, you need to make sure to follow up on it. You need to, after about 2-3 months, I would be calling the IRS, and this is our procedures that we make, where you start calling the IRS and say, hey, is that bankruptcy hold still on there? What's going on? Now, we do have cases where the IRS bankruptcy hold doesn't come off for 6 months to a year or more. And we have to dig into the IRS and say, hey, this should have happened. Someone didn't take this bankruptcy hold off. It is a very hard unit to actually communicate with. But again, you can't resolve your case. You can't move anything forward until this bankruptcy hold comes off. And the entire time this bankruptcy hold is on there and the IRS isn't taking collection actions, it's just kicking the can down the road, and that expiration date for assessments or collections is just getting put out further and further. So it doesn't help you at all. It just makes it so this lasts longer and longer. So again, it doesn't resolve anything when you have a hold on there that goes forever. And most of the times, in most of the cases, we see people, they just want to deal with this. They don't want this nightmare and stress on their shoulders. So there's plenty of times that we have to fight to get a bankruptcy hold off of a case, and so people can move forward. So I'm just checking real quick. I believe there is a bankruptcy number with the IRS. You know what? I misspoke. There is a bankruptcy unit, but again, you have to be referred there. It's not somewhere you can call directly, and usually they will send a referral. Hey, this case needs to be dealt with. They'll send a message to this unit, and you have to keep your fingers crossed that they actually respond. It's one of those IRS units that's deeply embedded in the bureaucracy and very difficult to get a hold of. This is a case, if you can't get this bankruptcy hold off or they're not moving on it, to involve taxpayer advocate. Now, currently it's taking 6 months just to get an advocate assigned, sometimes even longer than that. They're absolutely overwhelmed because the IRS has more problems than ever, and they're causing more problems than ever with taxpayers. So more and more people are turning to taxpayer advocate to try to get something done. You can always make an appointment to go into your local office. You can usually get an appointment within a couple months and talk to someone, and they can try to send a message to them and say, hey, what's going on here? But an appointment is one-time sit-down meeting. They can be very thorough. They can be very helpful. I've done it. But it's not someone that can stay on top of the case and follow up on it like taxpayer advocate can. Again, if you get a taxpayer advocate on a case and they're good, they can absolutely help resolve some of the very thorny and difficult issues out there. It's just getting someone on the case is the hard part. So anything discharged through bankruptcy or that's paid through a bankruptcy, you don't have to worry about it. Any debt discharged through bankruptcy, you don't have to worry about it. And one of the big issues out there is where people get cancellations of debt. When debt is canceled through a bankruptcy, you don't have to, it's not going to come back to hurt you. It's part of the bankruptcy process. The whole idea is to give people a fresh start on life. So it really can be very helpful for many people. It can be a great alternative. Consider it. If you're in that situation and you're thinking that you have to file for bankruptcy, it is an option. It's not right for many people. A lot of people, if you have any credit issues or if you're, it will trash your credit. It will absolutely cause a lot of damage to your credit. But a lot of people, once you get back on your feet 3, 4, 5 years after bankruptcy, you might still have the bankruptcy on your record. But if you have established good credit, good payment history moving forward from there, you can usually breathe easy and not have to worry about your case. So again, if you have questions, give us a call. If you have concerns, reach out to us or reach out to a local bankruptcy attorney. And again, get your questions answered before you make a mess, before you make a mistake. So again, especially with bankruptcy, it's one of those things, you ring that bell, you file for bankruptcy, You can amend in a petition so much, but once you're in bankruptcy, you can't, it's very hard to just step out without it really causing a lot of damage to your case and situation. Now, I want to touch on one other topic. This is very similar to bankruptcy. And this is a case, something that hurts a lot of people. It's called cancellation of debt. So in bankruptcy, you go in there and the IRS or your IRS debt and other debts, tax and not debt, they can all be discharged, or you can be put on a payment plan to pay it off over time. Whatever is not paid off, it's gone. There's no legal recourse for the creditors. And there could be actual penalties if they do pursue you for balances that have been discharged in bankruptcy. So the law has a lot of teeth in that to protect consumers. Bankruptcy law is all about helping people get a fresh start. Now, not all discharges of debt are the same. So when you had the housing crisis in 2008, 9, and 10, doing a short sale was very, very common. And even today, every now and then someone will do a short sale. They can't afford the house. They'll help sell it to somebody else. And you have to get the company to sign on. But it relieves them from the obligation of having a very high mortgage that they can't afford. Problem with the short sale is that you will get issued a cancellation of debt. And so a cancellation of debt shows up as income. So I just yesterday talked to someone, and this is actually a scam, but it kind of highlights this cancellation of debt issue. So if you have a life insurance policy and you took out loans, and we're talking about a whole life insurance policy where it has cash value. If you take out loans of more than what you owe on the policy and you stop paying and the policy gets canceled, they could come after you for what you owe them. And they will. So this is actually a legitimate insurance company trying to do some illegitimate things. So they're trying to take this debt from somebody that passed away, and they're trying to apply it to the beneficiaries that had no idea, didn't know about this policy, and they're just trying to collect the money from somebody. But again, they're treading on some really thin ice here, and this is a common scam. So I've told them to be very wary. This might actually be a legitimate company, but they're really treading some thin ice here. So anytime you have a cancellation of debt, and you're going to get issued, I believe it's a 1099-C, be very aware of that, because that can usually increase your taxes dramatically. So if you have a home that you do a short sale on, and the debt about $100,000, let's say, gets the bank doesn't get paid for it. The only way for the bank to write that off as a loss is to issue a 1099-C. When they issue that, it shows up as income to the taxpayer or the person that did the short sale. So that adds $100,000 of income to your tax return, and you could be making very little money, and then all of a sudden you have this huge tax bill. So you can claim insolvency when you file your tax return, and you should do that. So again, talk to a good tax preparer, make sure it's done right to claim insolvency, try to avoid that imposition of taxes. But if you don't qualify for insolvency, you have to deal with this and understand that there will be tax consequences involved. Another common thing that we're seeing with is SBA debt. When we do an offer and compromise on SBA debt for small businesses, and this is mainly EIDL loans. And so when they get that debt forgiven to the federal government, they will issue a cancellation of debt. And that cancellation of debt, and this is through just on SBA loans, but on when you do an offer or you settle with other departments of the government, you can still get issued a cancellation of debt, and then that gets stuck out of your taxes. So again, sometimes just be aware that when you negotiate something with the government, it can hit you on the backside and create an IRS issue that you weren't expecting. Now, when you do an offer in compromise with the IRS, you're settling tax debt specifically. So no, there's no cancellation of debt when you do an offer in compromise with the IRS or with the states. So again, that's a key difference there. But be aware, if you have other kinds of debts to the federal government and you settle it, you can get hit with that. And again, that's pretty nasty. So I've kind of covered most of what there is to talk about taxes and bankruptcy. Number one takeaway, ask questions. Ask even more questions than if you have a tax case, because if someone just files a power of attorney and starts representing you, it's pretty easy to change representatives. It's pretty easy to switch gears. It's most of the time. There are definitely times you can dig a hole with the IRS and have a hard time changing course, but that's rare. When you file for bankruptcy and you ring that bell, it is much harder to reverse course. Most of the times you can't. If you report assets on it, you lose control. And if the trustee finds assets you didn't report, it can be a big problem. You can lose things that you weren't prepared to lose, etc. So again, get expert advice. Call us at guardiantaxlaw.com or reach out to us through smartmoneyculture.tv and click that opportunities button in the top right hand link. So for tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about what happens when someone passes away. Not a fun topic, but absolutely a crucial one, because we deal with plenty of cases where there's taxes and on a decedent, someone that passes away, and then their family is left holding the bag and trying to figure this out. What do they do? How do they address it? So again, we're going to talk about estate, how to set up an estate, how to deal with that, some of the planning methods that can help you be prepared for and to address tax issues. But again, it's something that we see fairly regularly. We have plenty of clients where they're in that situation where someone has passed away and someone else is trying to figure out what happened, what was owed, and deal with that in the estate. So again, tune in tomorrow. It's been a fun, I always enjoy these. I like talking, as you can tell, but there's so much good information. So stay on top of what's going on. If you're not paying attention to the government shutdown, it might not affect you at all. It doesn't affect a lot of people. But for some people, it absolutely does. It shuts down businesses, shuts down whole industries when the government has a shutdown, and affects the economy, and not in a good way. So, but again, on the other hand, we need to figure out our overspending and hopefully make some rational choices here. Again, Hubert Johnson with Guardian Tax Law. Look us up on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and we look forward to answering your questions. And again, if you have letters, if you have basic questions, just give us a call. Free consultation, and we'll review those letters for free. So I hope everybody goes out and enjoys a wonderful day, has some great times, go hug your loved ones, and get those tax returns filed. We've got April 15th coming up. Don't wait. Tax preparers are slammed as it is. CPAs are slammed as it is. Get in sooner, and if you can't get it done or you can't get someone to do it, file for that extension. And there are plenty of tax preparers that will get your information. They'll just file it for free and then deal with your tax return after April 15th. The closer we get to it, the harder it's going to be. I reached out to my CPA. She knows it's coming. And again, trying to get on top of that before we hit that. So again, we'll talk tomorrow, and have a wonderful day.